Good morning, YouTube land. This is Veteran Mountain Man, and I just finished reading up on the Vault 7 security exposures, quote unquote, from Wikileaks. Well, I'm not going to do an analysis directly on the document, and here's why. The document in and of itself, I feel, is still very suspect, for a couple of different reasons. Number one, almost everything I'm seeing in this document is publicly available on the internet to all developers and anybody willing to go looking. I mean, it discusses UEFI, EFI highlights, methods of introducing miniature Linux kernels into EFIs so that you can bypass the entire EFI system and access the hardware directly. This is all over the net, guys. This is what all of these drones and all of these cell phone hacks and all of these tablet hacks are doing, is exactly this. Now, also, there's some terminology that's getting used that sounds really scary, and some misrepresentation to an extent. Now, am I agreeing that the CIA should be using these tactics? First and foremost, no. I do not want the CIA using these tactics, especially not on Americans. Now, if we need to spy on foreigners, and we have that right, we do on occasion have to collect intelligence against foreign enemies to better protect and defend the United States. I understand this, but I don't want these techniques being used on Americans. That being said, I've used some of these techniques. Not for the way the CIA is using them, but in development of new equipment. The UEFI, for those of you who don't know what that is, that's the User Extended Firmware Interface. It replaced the old 8-bit BIOS in computer systems. All electronic equipment using a motherboard that has been manufactured after 2006 has a UEFI in it. They just do. You might not know how to access the UEFI, but it's there. Now, something else that's not brought up is a lot of times these particular aspects are shielded. In your cell phone, for example, you usually can't access the UEFI without hooking it into a computer and running a jump kit on it that will allow you to access the boot memory and access the actual UEFI activation prompt, which means you have to have physical possession of the phone. Now, some of the other techniques that are being talked about are loading of Python mini processes onto systems like smart TVs. Well, yes, this can be done. However, you have to access the embedded sockets for loading data onto the memory modules. And this usually requires the use of a system called a DiDi-Prog, which is an electronic device that allows you to program logic controllers. You plug the logic controller into the DiDi-Prog, you load a flash utility drive file to it, and that allows you to access the DiDi-Prog in a different way. And that file has to be written in a compatible language for the equipment and controller sockets on the boards. So, most electronics engineers can do this kind of stuff, people. This is not some secret, mysterious thing going on here. In fact, in the development of a lot of these systems, you have to be able to do that kind of stuff in order to develop the new technology. Period. Now, one of the things that I am on board and extremely upset about is this bulk collection of zero-day exploits. However, I think there is some important information being left out about this. Specifically, most people don't know what a zero-day exploit really is. So I'm going to define it for you. A zero-day exploit is a fault of the operating software or utility that has not been reported to the manufacturer, or has been reported to the manufacturer, but has not made its way into the World Wide Web as a known vulnerability. A lot of times, when you update software, for those of you who are actually in the know, you should always update your software when your software notifies you that it has an update. For those of you who don't know, you probably aren't doing it anyway, and you're probably not going to listen to me when I tell you to do it. A lot of those updates are resolving zero-day exploits. And the information about those exploits don't make it out into the World Wide Web until after they're patched. Now, this information comes from a lot of sources, not just the federal government. Now, it is true that in the United States, under President Obama, the federal government swore that they would reveal more information about zero-day exploits that they've discovered and give them over to the manufacturers so that they could patch them. Here's the problem, people. There's no law requiring that. It was just something that the bureaucrats said that they would do. They're not required to. There's no legal obligation for them to. In fact, it's not all that surprising that they don't. Now, if you go digging into this stuff, you're going to see some inconsistencies that a lot of you are not going to notice because a lot of you aren't actually in the technology R&D systems. You're going to see stuff like the IBM AIX Power 7, 740 PowerPC, PPC 64-bit development devices and hosts. Well, something that I have to tell you is that the PowerPC is not in wide use. In fact, it's getting used on occasion on embedded NAS controllers and switches and router devices, but for the most part, it's not in use, people. You will not find a laptop out there running a PowerPC. Most of your smart TVs aren't running PowerPCs. PowerPCs are very much an exception, not a rule, in the use on the market. There's also information on Spark processors. All of this stuff is electronic engineering stuff, people. This is not unique to the CIA. In fact, a lot of these documents I can find at other locations on the internet that have been up for much longer than you realize, because this stuff is normal. Here we go. RBD Home, including third-party Python libraries for Dart remote testing. Well, Dart is actually a Linux operating system that's used to determine what you've been doing on your computer in a criminal justice case. I have the newest version of Dart sitting around here somewhere on a thumb drive. It takes up all of a gig on a thumb drive. You plug it into the machine and it live boots the computer as long as it's got power. It doesn't need any passwords. It doesn't need any access authorizations. It pulls up all the memory, all the data that's on the hard drive, and you can deconstruct, reconstruct sectors that have been deleted. You can trace network traffic logs that aren't even viewable by the user. This is common stuff, people. You can go download a copy of Dart if you want it. It's available on the net for free. It is. These are not new utilities, and the fact that this is being played out as something new, something, oh my god, it really isn't. Most of this stuff is available out there and has been available for a long, long time. You've got stuff here about Fight Club, Jukebox on Mac, Dance Floor on Linux, Rainmaker version archive, Visual Studio, Bamboo and Dart, Bonaboo and Dart. All of this stuff, people, is fairly commonplace used and is actually available out there pretty much to anyone. You've got information here about Notepad++ DLL hacks, LibreOffice portable DLL hacks, Opera Mail DLL hijacks, Kaspersky and ClamWin DLL hijacks. The information about that stuff's out on the market. It has been for quite some time. hammer drill developer notes. All of this stuff is open for the most part and available out there to almost anybody who wants it. So the fact that you are now, yelling and hooting and hollering, and this is becoming really, really big news, I can't understand, because most of this has been out there. What it really comes down to is this. Electronic devices are compromisable because they're a machine, and every machine is fallible. No security whatsoever will ever protect you 100%. And I say that because even if you were to take your computer that you're listening to me on, do this, and you were to put it in a private room inside a locked building with no access to any kind of communications device, even if all it is plugged into the wiring, somebody can hijack that system. It's not easy, but it can be done. Now, if the person has physical access to the system, it's even easier, because all they have to do is plug in a thumb drive, and they have access to everything you have. And this is not new, people. I have been using thumb drive hijacks to take over machines to repair them for over a decade now. Micro-boot Linux kernels and embedded operating systems are the way of the future. They are what we're going to see more of. And if you're having trouble following that this stuff is already in use and has been for quite some time, you might need to take a step back and reduce the amount of technology that you use, especially if this causes you fear. Because the more technology you use, the more you're going to be vulnerable to this stuff. Especially if you don't know what it actually is. Because it's basically the equivalent of a person from the Middle Ages trying to understand a light switch. Well, I want to thank you all again for joining me on my podcast. Please like and subscribe if you like what I'm doing here. Also, don't forget, you can interact with me at minds.com/veteran mountain man. I want to thank you all and have a good day.